We want to pass on skills to our children that will help them succeed in building meaningful lives out there in the real world. But we may feel ill-equipped to train them well. In fact, many parents themselves struggle with being able to plan and execute the tasks that will help them achieve their own goals. Today's guest, Ginny Kochis, is here to help us with building executive function skills in moms and kids.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Mladinich, your host, and today's topic is building executive function skills in moms and kids, and I'm so happy to have Ginny Kochis back on the show. Ginny Kochis is a Catholic wife and mom of 3 differently wired children. She founded the Not So Formulaic community to support Catholic moms raising out-of-the-box kids. Ginny believes God gives curious, creative, intense children the exact mother they need to thrive. And this is in the show notes along with several other resources. Find Ginny Kochis at notsoformulaic.com. Hey, Ginny, it is so good to have you back.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you.
Oh, thank you. What do we mean? Just start us off by defining executive function skills, because I honestly had to look it up again. I always sort of forget what it means.
I had never heard of it, actually. I mean, I was a high school English teacher and I had all these education courses and everything. And I had never actually heard of it until a colleague of mine who was apologizing for her kind of flightiness, her disorganization. And she said, she had a stroke a couple of years previously, and she was doing great. I mean, she was, doing very well. And it said, ever since my stroke, I don't have any executive function skills. And I said, what is that? And she actually had to explain it to me. This was back probably 20 years ago. It would have been roughly 20 years ago. And so she explained to me that it's the explanation she gave me at the time was that it's how we organize ourselves, our brains, our bodies, our spaces. And as I, 6 years later, roughly, I had my children and they grew up, and I started to notice some behaviors, not just in them, but in myself. I've never really been a super organized person. And I was seeing that reflected in my children. Things were getting lost. They were so easily distracted. And the more I researched what was going on, because of, having a daughter on the spectrum, and then just my husband and I being, kind of creative people, I wanted to know why we were struggling so much. And I learned that executive function is the set of neural processes that help our brains keep track of the things around us and our internal kind of organization system. So it is the way we organize our brains, our bodies, our spaces, ourselves. And it kind of branches out into all facets of life. So it's not just simply being able to keep your calendar or your binders organized or your room clean. It's actually a lot more than that. So.
Wow, that's so interesting. I'm a little bit of a brain science geek. I'm always just picking up little tidbits. Of course, I'm not a scientist and I don't understand them deeply. But the more I learn about the way our brains work, the more I'm in awe of God's design, because there's so much in Scripture that calls to the way we're wired, to think about the future and to plan and to be discerning God's plan and all of that. I mean, you hear a little bit of that, what we're talking about there. So why ultimately is it important for us to start to develop skills like this? And you mentioned that you and your husband are creative. I'm a creative type too. I tend to be okay with a little mess. I like to have everything where I can see it. I'm really tactile. Sure. And so I can look even less organized than I am. But so what's that? How has that been helpful?
Well, I think it's, when I mentioned previously that it's not just about organization, I mean, there are other things when you talk about executive function that are really integral. So like, for example, my oldest, when I would ask her to go get dressed, she's an artist. She's a reader. She's a very much kind of a daydreamer. I would say, okay, time to go get your clothes on. 30 minutes later, I would walk upstairs and I would find her next to her gigantic stack of books on the table beside her bed, still in her pajamas, with like 3 books open on her bed, and she's reading a 4th one. And then I said, well, honey, I asked you to get dressed. Oh, you did? Yes, I did. You said you were going to get dressed. So it's that kind of thing. I think the more we work on our executive function skills, which, to kind of back up a little bit, you're either born with them or you're not. So it's something that you really won't develop them over time unless you're actively working to build them. And so, for her and for us, we had to really help her develop, the working memory skills that she needed, both verbal and nonverbal, so that she could remember, the series of steps in a task. When I'm told to go get dressed, I need to A, go up the stairs, B, pick out my clothing, C, put my clothing on, D, we have to break it down into little tiny steps for her. And it has gotten much better. I mean, she'll be 15 in December. And she's much more reliable as far as being able to do those sorts of things by herself, than she was when she was younger. So yeah, I mean, that's just one example, I think, of the way it's helped her and helped us, because we're not screaming, why haven't you gotten dressed? We have to leave in 5 minutes. Now she knows, what she needs to do and how she can, process those steps in her brain.
Wow, you're bringing back a really vivid memory for me. When my daughter was, I don't know, maybe 5, I had told her to clean up her toys. We had this little playroom in our first home, and I came back a half hour later, right? And nothing was cleaned up. It was all just still everywhere. And we had bins for certain things. I mean, there was a system actually there. And I, upbraided her and said a few words and went away and came back, and it still wasn't being done. And so I remember I ran into the laundry room and closed the door because I knew I was about to lose my temper, and I was really trying not to, kind of, right? And then I just prayed a little bit, and I walked back in and I said, why don't we do it together? Because I knew she knew how, but she's also a highly relational girl. And I see this even to this day. She graduated from college with honors. She's doing fine. She has a good job. But she needs people with her in the process to get started. And so as soon as we started to do it together, things started to flow. So that segues me into, how did you begin this process of maybe learning it for yourself, learning it for them? What did that look like?
Sure. So the thing about building executive function skills is you need some sort of external structure to order your brain for you. Because there are 7 zones of regulation that the typically wired brain is able to master kind of on their own. And each one of those skills, or each zone, builds on the one before it. So, it includes things like I mentioned, the working memory, the verbal and the nonverbal working memory, I actually have a whole list I can pull up because I can never remember them off the top of my head.
Yeah. And I've got all your links to your resources in the show notes too. So folks will be able to look at these things.
Yeah. So the very first one is awareness. Oh yeah. Sorry. So the very first one is awareness, which is kind of like the ability to notice what's going on around you, from other people's feelings and emotions to the amount of available personal space that you have. If you don't have awareness of the world around you, it's going to be really hard to interact with people, to order to find your books, to, remember to bring home your water bottle, because you're in your own world. Awareness kind of brings you out of yourself, to help you see what's going on. And then there's restraint, which is the ability to control the impulse to act. So, at a real basic level, this is impulse control. Children, well, especially children, and sometimes adults who struggle with executive function also have a really difficult time with impulse control. Being able to not, or being able to sit still, or, speaking out of turn, or all those kinds of things. And then you get into working memory, your nonverbal working memory that helps you remember and categorize shapes, sizes, colors, smells, appearances. So if you have a deficit in nonverbal working memory, it's going to impact your ability to remember rules or even the steps in a process. So if you were to say, like one of the mothers in my Facebook group was talking one day about how she had asked her son to make coffee. Now, her child is brilliant. He is, when he was 9 years old, he was doing high school level science work, just a very smart young boy, but he cannot remember the steps in the process to making the coffee. So she actually walked him through it, and he still couldn't get it right. So at the end of the whole, experience, there were coffee grounds everywhere. The baby was crying, like she still didn't have her coffee, and her son was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, it was it can be frustrating. And then, after the nonverbal working memory, you have the verbal working memory, which helps you process verbal instructions. So for this particular child, he couldn't remember the steps in the process. And he was also having a hard time processing what his mother was telling him in the moment. And then the last three are emotional expression, which is the ability to express what you're feeling appropriately. Self-motivation, which is exactly what it sounds like. And then I call this the 2 Ps, which is basically, you break down the steps in a process, you make a plan, and then you problem solve. So planning and problem solving, being able to plan out ahead in advance what you're going to do. And then when you get a curveball thrown your way, being able to, find your way out of that. So in order to really kind of learn those skills, you need those outside external reminders, so to speak, before you can start, until they become like second nature. So for instance, we have lots of checklists around our house. For when you get up in the morning, these are the things you need to do: first, second, third, fourth. Get up, make your bed, say your morning offering, go and use the bathroom, get your clothes on, put your pajamas in the laundry basket. So eventually for her, it becomes like routine. So she's just sort of gotten into this routine of, I do these steps in this order. And then other things that we have, like near the dishwasher, take photos of what we want the inside of the dishwasher to look like when it's been loaded. So that way they can actually look and follow and see specifically where things go. So they're not forgetting how to do it. Wow. Having more checklists by the front door. So when they come in, my kids are in school now. We were homeschooling, but we've transitioned everybody to school now. So they know, where to put your book bag, unpack your lunchbox, get your books out, go do your 15 minutes of a break, come back down here for homework, so everything it feels very like lockstep. But it's more just developing those routines that kids can kind of take on as their own thing without the external support eventually, and then modify for later on in their lives. So for me as an adult, when I bring in the mail from the house, my routine is I sort through it at the front door. The bills go at the desk, where my husband does all of that financial stuff. Catalogs and everything typically go straight into the kitchen because I'm going to look through them and then toss them in the recycle bin when I'm done. Any packages or things get opened immediately, and what's in them gets sorted to their right places, because otherwise I will just come in and get distracted and drop it. And then I have, all this stuff at the front door, and I can't function like that, even though I do function like that. Like I function better with order.
Right.
So yeah, that was a really long-winded explanation, but I hope that covers, what you were curious about.
Oh, absolutely fascinating too. When you think about the steps, I was taking a little bit of notes because I have a poor memory. I mean, I really don't I have to take notes all the time. So awareness, restraint, working memory, the nonverbal, the verbal memory, emotional expression, self-motivation, and then the P's, process, plan, and problem solve. Really neat to have that all laid out and then to see what it looks like. It looks like checklists. It looks like routines. And it builds competency, I would think, and confidence so that those creative minds can have that playfulness within a structure, which I always have found as a creative person, like a deadline really helps me. Or when I was in school, tell me what you want me to write about or what points you want me to prove or whatever it is. That helps me to channel all my creativity to a purpose. And so I'm just seeing how your creative kids, your out of the box kids would not be less free in this, but more free.
Yeah. And it's very typical in children who have other developmental or learning delays. So children who have ADHD very often have difficulty with executive function delay. But children who have ADHD are also amazing public speakers. They tend to be great leaders. They tend to be really creative minds who come up with ideas that most people would never consider. And it's because their brains are so busy focusing on the amazing things that they're thinking about. They don't really have time or like the wiring really to think about, I really shouldn't say what's on my mind right now. I should wait and say it later. Or, now is not the time for me to go and climb that set of monkey bars just because I'm trying to see how fast I can do it and how that would compare to the land speed of a giraffe or, whatever it is that they're thinking. Sometimes the stuff that they think is just so out there.
It's amazing.
And amazing, but yeah, so and when you get the way that brains are wired, like all those neural networks are like little hubs. And in individuals who have, above average intelligence, the hubs are tighter and more, they're packed in there. And so it kind of squeezes out. I mean, this is a really poor non-scientific explanation, but it kind of squeezes out all the neural pathways that would regularly be dedicated to things like executive function or to what people would call common sense. So, that's why you always hear of the absent-minded professor. Well, that's because there's so much going on within the intellect that those more basic skills aren't as prominent. And I remember I went to high school with a young lady who was so smart. And we used to tease her because she would frequently get confused about how to open her front door. But it wasn't and we knew it wasn't because she wasn't smart. We just knew that her brain was not focused on opening that front door. It was solving, advanced equations in her mind. She was never not thinking. And so I have to remind myself that in children, when we see these kinds of behaviors, it's not because the kid is trying to be difficult or, intentionally misbehaving. It's because their brains are just so busy and they're not set up for the kind of behaviors that you would anticipate from a child, at that stage or in that particular situation, like being able to sit still and listen. It can be hard for some kids because their brains just aren't equipped for that.
Wow. Yeah. So, really high speed processing going on in the background, which is taking up a lot of focus and energy. I'm just curious, and didn't ask you this in advance, but are any of your kids getting old enough to learn to drive yet?
Well, my oldest, she will be 15, in December. And that I'm a little worried, but it'll be okay. It'll be okay. She does have a tendency to get, when there's too much going on, she gets a little frantic. Part of that is, the fact that she's on the spectrum. Part of that is her personality. Part of that is that she has two very high-strung parents who also get kind of panicked when there's a lot of stuff going on. So part of it is nature, part of it is nurture. It will be interesting to see how her executive function skills factor into her ability to drive. My mother has a beach house in this very, very small town in North Carolina. And I learned how to drive there, starting when I was 12. My oldest actually, was given the opportunity to drive a golf cart when she was 4.
Wow.
So she has some experience behind the wheel, but there's nobody on the roads, and it's just a very quiet place. So we'll probably take her down there this summer, and say, okay, let's sit you behind the wheel, and we're just going to very slowly travel down the road. Yeah. So I'm assuming that's why you were asking about the driving, just the executive function that goes in with that.
Yeah. And also because learning to have routines and frameworks can help us know the rules of the road and what your proper behavior is. But with driving, we also have to be ready for the unexpected. We have to kind of expect other people to be distracted or to be, whatever, not paying attention. And so it makes me wonder, because I'm so distractible. And I remember telling my father as a young driver, Dad, some days I feel like I am such a good driver, and other days I think I'm the worst driver in the world, because I was having near misses. But God preserved my life and the lives of those around me. And I think I've gotten to be a good driver just simply because I learned not to trust my own attention span, but to keep checking and to keep, looking around and being in that framework of just practicing awareness.
Yeah. No, it's having to filter in all of that different stimuli, and then remember all the steps, like when you're turning, the turn signal, slowing down. I'm glad we don't drive stick, because teaching her to shift would be an extra added thing. But it's I can understand why you would have felt that way. It can be hard.
Yeah, you think, because you're brain smart, your brain's always working and it knows the rules, and you think, yeah, I got this. But then unexpected things are happening too, or something unexpected happens in your head and you realize you've been driving for a while without noticing what's around you. It's really interesting. So over time, what are you seeing as some of the fruits for your kids of practicing these kinds of skills?
I think they feel more at peace. And that's the key. I want them to feel at peace. I want them to feel secure. I don't want them to be nervous or anxious about not being able to find things, not being able to remember things, being late, struggling with, just how to interact with people, or even, having a solid prayer life. How do you handle all those facets of a full life? And I, in helping them develop these skills, that's my goal. My goal is to help them, be at peace and not feel distracted or frustrated by the little things that they really can't control. I would say that would be, one of the major fruits. I think, on the smaller side, some of the less big picture items, I think would be, simply just being able to turn in assignments on time, and not staying up late, trying to get stuff done, or, once you've completed something, not losing it, being able to actually turn it in, and this especially, in homeschool, there is, some concern about that, because, a child can be working on something in their room and then go to bring it to you and suddenly they can't find it anywhere. But if your child's in school, it's got to get from their room to the car or to the bus to the school. And then in university, they're on their own. While there actually are colleges and universities who have programs for kids with executive function deficits. And so they do get a little bit of support, or they can get support if they need it. But I just want them to be able to have those wins, because the more they have those victories, the less they start to question themselves and their value as a child of God. Because it can be really, when you see everybody else around you not having the same kind of problems, it can be really demoralizing. And I, just don't want that for them. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you acknowledge the wins? Are there just conversations about it, or are there milestones and rewards? Like, what kind of an awareness do you build around those wins so that they notice their own progress?
I think it depends on the kid. You kind of have to figure out what I call it currency. What is it that motivates them on the one hand, and then on the other hand, how are they going to handle praise, or acknowledgement, because some children are very private. My 11-year-old, exceedingly private, doesn't like to be fawned over, doesn't really like to be celebrated, but she also craves words of affirmation. So it's this interesting dichotomy. So, for her, it's typically just a, hey, I'm really proud of you. You did XYZ. And then that's it. For my oldest, it's like a big celebration. Like, hey, let's put this, let's write down on a piece of paper that henceforth on this day, you were able to, and then put it up on your wall. And then she'll, do a little celebratory dance. And then for my youngest, he'll be 7 in a couple of weeks. And for him, it's more just like I give him a little laminated card with little checkoffs for things that he needs to bring home from school. So, water bottle, glasses, books, lunchbox. And when he uses his little marker and checks those things off, then, he comes home and gets a little treat. So it's like, for him, it's like this tangible, like, hey, I get some chocolate if I do all this stuff. And so, yes, right now with him, it is kind of like the carrot and the stick. And, but as he grows older, I think it will be easier to be more abstract with it and not as concrete. It's just not where he is right now. So,
yeah, a little just fun nugget of brain science is that when we talk about the neuroplasticity of the brain, the way it responds to our practice, our habits, our use, and strengthens neural pathways that become more and more familiar so that our habits become stronger and more embedded. But the other thing is that when we celebrate, even just a happy dance, a fist pump or a good for you, a high five, something on the wall, those little celebrations cause a response in the brain. It causes a little dopamine hit, which tells the brain, oh, I like to do this thing. And we'll now start to look forward to that thing and wire for it. So it will strengthen those neural pathways, not just because of repetition, but because of the happy feeling that followed accomplishing it. And it makes it easier and easier to accomplish those things. So the brain is very responsive to celebration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Yeah. So any final thoughts you want to leave us with, Ginny?
No, I just, I think it's really important for parents to understand that what looks like, impulsive, destructive, completely disorganized, disregard for anybody's space or personal belongings or even their own belongings isn't, it isn't intentional malice. It's not laziness. It's not, your child's not damaged. It's just a matter of building up that executive function skills 9 times out of 10. And that, their behavior is always communication. So, if you see something that they're doing, there's typically a reason behind it. There's something else going on. So, I think that would be my final, just recommendation or final thoughts is, to always look at it through the lens of what is my kiddo trying to tell me based on what they're doing, how they're behaving, and what they're having trouble with. So.
Oh, that's such a compassionate view. I think that's just a beautiful note to end on, Ginny, because we are all wounded. We've all had our own frustrations with ourselves, and struggling with our kids like that, we can start to take personally. And so when you know that it's really just them struggling in their own brain development and calling out for a little help, it really does change the landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ginny. It's always good to have you. And we're going to have you back again really soon. I'm excited. Yeah. We're going to do another topic with you very soon. Everybody, please find Ginny Kochis at notsoformulaic.com. That's in the show notes. But if you're just listening, it's notsoformulaic.com. Not so formulaic. And lots of other resources in the show notes. Thanks for being with us. And stay tuned for our short feature coming right up.
Hi everyone, I'm Chantal Howard with From Ideal to Real, here with another episode to hopefully help you move from dream to reality, especially as it relates to your homeschool mission. So happy New Year, the new liturgical year, of course. With the launch of Advent, we begin again the cycle of living through the life of Christ. And I hope that you will take your homeschool train and hook it. to the church's life so that you can experience the beauty of the liturgical life breathing through your homeschool, bringing distinction and refreshment with fasts and feasts, with seasons of festivity and penitential practices so that you never feel stagnant. It's a beautiful, wise gift that the church has given to us, and our Lord allows us to walk with him through all of the different emotional seasons and experiences of his mission. And we can correlate our homeschool to that. So in particular today, as we look at this Advent season, I want to remind you that you are the author of your homeschool. If you're feeling the pressure right now, as the world is pushing us forward, materialism is speeding up, expectations, concerts, sports, all of the stuff that gets piled on this time of year, I want to give you permission to remember that you can put on the brakes and pull back, like the spirit of Advent asks us to do, into the darkness where we live in anticipation, awaiting the dawning of the light. And one way that we can do this in particular is by adapting the tradition of the Danes, the Danish tradition of hygge. Hygge is a word that means basically creating an environment of coziness. And the Old Norse word that this comes from means to think, a space to think, to reflect, to allow our minds to be enriched with things of beauty and depth. And so this is the moment for you to be able to bring to the forefront of your home life rich literature, to perhaps consider pausing the screens and bringing out the board games instead, and creating an environment where your children can learn handcrafts or art or cooking or things of this nature. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you because everybody's at a different place. And again, you are the author. So consider choosing something new, refreshing, and simple that you can implement this Advent that will help bring about a feeling of hygge in your home. Maybe it's candles that you light around the Advent wreath. Maybe it's putting up the Christmas tree early, but refraining from decorating it with Christmas everything, and instead just having white lights, waiting for the ornaments to arrive as you approach closer to Christmas. Maybe it's prompting your children to read aloud, do some choral reading or music. This is the time when we can freely and confidently know that the Lord is asking us to dwell in this space. So be not afraid if it means that you postpone papers or you put a pause on some heavier academic work to create an environment where your children can live richly this season of Advent. It will bring about renewal in your homeschool, and I guarantee you the work that they produce on the flip side of this season will be even more astute, and their language skills, their ability to present, their ability to articulate things will be advanced simply by creating this cultural environment. So one of the reasons that we do this is because we can feel in our homeschool that tension towards productivity and efficiency and get it done. And if you're feeling that anxiety rising, then I just want you to know that this is your invitation to pause and to choose again. I'm Chantal Howard. You can find me at aromarosary.com or chantal-howard.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at catholic.oil.mom. Stay tuned for more episodes coming to you soon. Take care.
And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.